Hello everybody! So I'm going to be filming the November wrap-up of all of these books that I read. Hold on. There we go. A little arm workout for the day. And so today I'm going to talk about my favorite books that I read in November and also my most disappointing books in November. So if you don't know who I am, my name is Lily and I'm the book blogger behind Utopia State of Mind. Normally these would be on Instagram Live, but I've been having trouble finding ways to share them with people just because Instagram TV is like a very strange way to find it on my profile. So I decided to put them all on YouTube so it would be easier for everyone to find and to watch again. So I'm going to talk about the statistics of my month, and then I'm going to talk about the 5-star books that I read all month, talk about my most favorite book of November and my disappointing books of November, which are a little bit hyped and a little bit, pretty loved. So I'm a little bit worried that for my first YouTube video, I'm gonna get a bunch of slack. Okay, so I have a notepad here where I've gone through all of my books so that I can refer to it. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. I read 29 books in November. But I do want to preface that today is the last day of November, and I legit thought that yesterday was the last day of November. I don't know if anyone saw my tweets. I was like, go to write all my book reviews for the last day of November, and then I turned the page in my bullet journal to start tallying all of the things I bought in November, and then it was like, oh, the 30th of November. So I gained 24 hours in a magical feat of just confusion. So I've read at this moment 29 with a caveat. So I have only, I've not finished them yet. So I am 2% basically away from finishing my audiobook, and I'm about 20% away from finishing my e-arc, so my electronic advanced read copy. So I'm counting them in the statistics because I'm holding myself, and you all are holding myself, to finishing those 2 books today. In November, I read 29 books, read/listened to 29 books. I listened to 6 audiobooks, which is so surprising to me. I don't actually know how that happened. I think it was because in the beginning of November, I was finishing up Black Sun, which I didn't get to finish in October. I thought I would, but I didn't get to finish it. So I think that's why it's an extra one. And also, I'm finishing an audiobook today. So I think that accounts for those 2 audiobooks. And of the 29 books, I've read about 76% by authors of color or people of color characters. And I've read 24% of queer characters or queer authors. So my goal every month is to read 50% of people of color characters or authors of color, and then 33%, so about a third of them to be queer reads. I have missed the mark on queer reads by just a smidge, by 9%. And I have overshot the mark for authors of color and characters of color. So I feel okay about it. I feel pretty good about being close, but also I didn't make it. So, how good can you feel about that then? And this month I read 11 5-star books, read/listened to. 11 5-star books. I think that that's probably low for me, and I think in November it was not the best reading month in terms of the best 5-star books, but also I think it's also relative, right? So for some people 11 5-stars would be like, oh my god, you had a fantastic month, or even just reading 11 books in the entire year or the entire month would be fantastic. So it's super relative. And I also wanted to point out that for me, for different genres, I have different standards of criteria for 5-star reads. And so I read a bunch of middle grade, and I read a few romance books. And so for me, I think the standards for those are definitely different than, for example, adult fantasy or adult science fiction or even just YA books in general, right? So for middle grade, I'm looking for books that hit me deep in the heart. Punch me in the heart and keep going, because that's how moved I am. And then for, also moved in extremely relatable. So not, it doesn't have to be, you know, a really gripping or really sad book, but just sort of, I want to be emotionally touched. My heart wants to be emotionally disturbed in some way. And then for adult romances, for me, I just need it to be super like the chemistry needs to be there. I need to feel the chemistry, I need to feel the romance, and also it's so character driven. And that's not to say that adult romances are not plot driven, but for me, the characters have to shine. And if I'm kind of like on the fence about characters, or I don't really have a good sense of what drives them, that for me is a bigger flaw in such a character-driven genre than other genres, for example. So, let's talk about books. I'm gonna talk, the first time I filmed this, I did a completely different order. So if the second time, we're flipping it around. I'm gonna start with middle grade books. I have 3 5-star middle grade books that I read this month. I read, let's just start with the books for January and move our way back. So I read Amari and the Night Brothers. This is January debut, and okay, I know that we're all kind of searching for magical school / magical society books, kind of like Harry Potter, but obviously not Harry Potter, because you know why. Because you know why, and I know why. So Amari and the Night Brothers definitely gives me that vibes. It gives me the like magical society, magical department vibes, without being that. So, like fabulous. But also, the world building for that one is so fantastic. But for me, it works so well because it has these other veins that I really love. So, for example, I really love how much Amari loves her brother and how fierce their relationship is, and how like no matter what anyone says, Amari is just like, hey, my brother's alive and I'ma find him. And so another thing I really loved about Amari and the Night Brothers is that Amari has to deal with feeling like an outsider to the magical community, because essentially she is. Everyone has these like legacies and, you know, elitist vibes, and so Amari is the outsider and she has to deal with, how do I change people's opinion of me? How do I navigate this world where I feel like this, and is it worth it? What am I supposed to do? So it works really well. It's also a series opener, so keep your eye out for it in January. It is it's just emotional and there's a lot of action, but it like gets to you. It gets to you deep in the heart. And then the other middle grade I read, which also surprisingly got to like the heart of me, was Never After the 13th Fairy. And in this one, what got to me is that I had no idea that Philomena, which is the main character, is adopted. So I'm adopted, and that's why it got to me. And so it was such a surprise, and it was so organically woven into the story where it was a thing, but it wasn't like the thing, right? And there was talk about origins and how you feel about those types of things. So it was talked about, but it wasn't the main thing, essentially. But also has this kind of like Rick Riordan umbrella, you know, of those kinds of stories where it's Arsha, Serpent's Game / Serpent's Secret, I think, are the 2 ones. You know, The Battle, the Paula Santiago, you know, all of those kinds of books. It has that vibe. Because it has this contemporary setting, but also this fantastical world. And so things I loved about it. First off, there are so many passages of this fairy tale prose, you know, the lyrical rhyming thing, and listening to it on audiobook made it like someone was telling me a bedtime story, and that was amazingly. That just like soothed me so much when I was listening to it and doing the dishes, and it was just like I could fall asleep right now while washing this pan. And then second off, Philomena loves books. I love books. You love books. What's more to love? And it's just, if you ever felt like the last book in a series or the next book in a series was supposed to come out and then didn't come out, and then your heart just kind of dropped and broke into a million different pieces, and that was upsetting to you, that's as upsetting to you as it is to her. So Philomena was just a beautiful bookworm, and I loved it. Just the idea of fairy tales not being what you think they are, that's a big theme I think that I've realized that I love in general in books, you know, like the story you know isn't the real story, or the story you know, like, has a different villain. That's my favorite actually. But that kind of element is really deeply in the Never After book, and I hope that it's a series, so I want to see a lot more Philomena. My last 5-star middle grade is The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James. This is the audiobook where I'm not done reading it yet. As I said, I have like 2%. In reality, it's more like 10%, but it's basically the same thing. But what I loved about this one was Sunny has a lot of stuff going on. Sunny just got a new heart. Sunny has a hugely complex, complicated family situation mess thing with her mom, her biological mom, and then her guardian, kind of like adopted-esque mom. It's not really it's in the realm of adoption-esque, but it's not really ever defined as such. Like, you know, you're never like, oh, this is my adopted mom, this is my biological mom. It's more nebulous in that, but it's super, that vibe is like super there. And also, Sunny is trying to figure out her sexuality, and her questioning sexuality specifically. So there's a lot of just heart-wrenching moments, right? All of those 3 are pretty big issues for anyone to be going through. And for me, The Mighty Heart of Sunny St. James was one of those books where Ashley Herring Blake is so good at making sure that we have these moments of happiness, these pure happiness moments that are undercut with fear and doubt, and then also these moments of fear and doubt. So everything has this beautiful balance between highs and lows and middles and somewhere in between, and the book just works because there are never moments where you get like so overwhelmingly sad, because it's all balanced so beautifully. And Sunny is such a relatable, just endearing, charismatic, caring girl who's going through so many complex feelings, and my heart just goes out for her. And as I said, I'm not done with the book, but I know it'll be 5 stars. I just know it in my bones and in my heart that it'll be 5 stars. So that's why I'm including it here. And then let's talk about some adult books that I loved. Okay, let's start with the first one, Black Sun. As I said, it was an audiobook that I was listening to in October. Didn't finish it in October. That's kind of how things happen. Finished it in November, like my first audiobook of November. And I think it's robbed that it did not go further in the Goodreads Choice Awards. It deserved to go way further. And I listened to an audiobook, and for me, it had beautiful pacing. Like, sometimes I feel like adult fantasy books have these ups and lows and ups and lows, and no shade on those. Love them as well. But for me, for an audiobook, sometimes it's hard to pick it back up when it's in that low. But for Black Sun, it just goes up and up and up and up and up. And so I always wanted to listen to it. I never took any breaks. I always wanted to listen to it. And so for me, that meant so much. And also, in Black Sun, one of the big themes that it talks about a lot is individual agency versus destiny, right? So what are the choices we're making that play into fate and destiny? And there are so many, obviously everyone has their own opinions on fate and destiny and like what our fate and what our destiny is. But kind of this idea about what can we change in our lives to impact our future and like the world future. That's a huge theme that I love in general, kind of individual agency versus destiny. But this one talks about how, our individual choices that lead us on a path, and like, do we have control over that path, and where is that path gonna take us? So that's why I loved Black Sun, and I'm excited for the rest of it. It's a series, so I'm glad I'm caught up, and I'm ready for book 2. And the second adult book I read was a romance book. It's Rachel Lynn Solomon's adult romance debut. It is The X Talk. And for me, in Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, which is the most recent release from Rachel Lynn Solomon, the banter in that one is off the charts. It is quick, it is clever, it is witty, it is like that right amount of cutting to the point where the insults are laced with this tension and this yearning, and the X Talk has that banter just 100 times fold, right? So that's one of the reasons I love Today, Tonight, Tomorrow, and it's in the X Talk, and I was like, yes, love it. Enemies to lovers, with that banter, it is like chef's kiss. That's what I loved about it. And also for me, it was super relatable because the main character, she's going through this struggle where she has to figure out career and passion, and I think sometimes we have this idea that we're gonna be on this one career and that's how we're going to really live out our passions, right? So for example, I like books, so I want to be a writer, for example. This is not how I feel, but for example, that idea. But there are so many different ways that you can love books and do a job that isn't that. And so we get this idea like, okay, I have to do this, but what if we didn't have to do this, right? Like, what if we could love books and work in marketing, or love works and work in, book reviewing, for example. So it's really her struggle and her kind of inner dilemma, and she also is dealing with grief still, but also her struggles with those kinds of topics just felt so relatable to me. And I think it's also something that isn't as talked about but should be talked about. And now we'll go into the YA books. So basically we did this entire video second take in an entirely different order. So we're going to talk about YA books right now. Let's talk about books already released first. So I want to talk about The Black Kids. So The Black Kids is a book that I got as an e-arc, so an electronic advanced read copy, and I didn't manage to read it before release. So I read a lot of Goodreads reviews which were like, this book is super intense, and at the time that it came out, I just was not in the mental headspace to read it, so I just waited. And then I was in the mental headspace to read it, and I buddy read this one with Emma from Misprint, and it's like an historical fiction. It takes place around the Rodney King murder, so it felt super relevant. It is really relevant to life, but also really relevant because obviously this year the Black Lives Matter protests were huge in the United States, and so reading that and like living in this kind of political climate just felt kind of like big bookends on my head. So just big bookends in general, because you kind of think about what things have changed and what things haven't changed, and what kind of protest, what kind of want for change gets attention, right? How are we going to make change? So The Black Kids talks about that, obviously, but it also talks about this girl who kind of is having to deal with her own privilege because she comes from a more wealthy background than some other kids. And she is Black, so she comes from a more wealthy background than other kids in her school come from. And so she's trying to figure out, where do I fall in this spectrum, right? How does my identity as a Black person and my own biases as someone who has more money than, for example, other Black people in my school, because there's a lot of drama that goes on. So how does my identity relate to what's going on and relate to my own fears and my own racism and my own racist friends? So how do I kind of fit myself into it? And it's about a situation that sparks her kind of social awakening and also social, I wouldn't say consciousness, but sort of putting yourself in an active place in social consciousness, because I think that sometimes you can have like a passive approach to it. My actions are not whatever, they're not bad, they're not racist, they're not sexist, etc., but a more active place in that, how do I call people out on the things that they're saying? How do I actively look at my place in society and actively look at my actions? So that's why I really loved The Black Kids. The next book I want to talk about, which is a 5-star read, which is also out now, is dun, da, 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 The Ever Cruel Kingdom. Yay! So this is the second book in the Never Tilting World duology. What I love about this book, besides the characters, which is just always going to be at least 5 stars for me because, they're fantastic, But what I really loved about this book is that it talks a lot about cycles. And what do I mean by cycles? Well, I'll tell you what I mean. I mean that these cycles of behaviors and patterns of thinking that we fall into, right? So this like, oh, I made a mistake and I'm gonna lie to cover up my mistake, and then I have to lie about that mistake, just, piled on top of each other. And it's a theme that is kind of explored throughout a bunch of different angles in the Never Tilting world, and specifically the Ever Cruel Kingdom. How can we fix those cycles of behavior? How can we fix those cycles of thinking? Do we tear the system down, start all over again? What do we do to fix it, to make atones for our mistakes? Like, how do we stop these relationships of hurt and mistakes and pain and just all of those different things? And so the Ever Cruel Kingdom really talks about how we can do this. And I mean, it's also like so many great sister relationships in this book, and it's just such a satisfying conclusion to one of my favorite duologies. So let's see. The next one that I want to talk about is one that comes out in December, and it's actually an anthology. So I don't read that many anthologies, period. I don't 5-star that many anthologies, period. A Universe of Wishes, which is the 5-star read, it is full of mostly authors I love and know already that I love. So for me, it was kind of like a no-brainer, right? I love, for example, Mark Oshiro. I love Anna Marie McLemore. So of course, I'm going to love their stories in it. Atara Sim, right? Like all of these different, Danielle Clayton, Samira Ahmed, like all of these different authors that I love their works. They have a short story in it, and it was gorgeous. And I loved them so much. And A Universe of Wishes is all about finding yourself in these fantastical worlds, finding yourself in these stories, and also how important and meaningful and affirming it is to find yourself in those stories, and if you don't, to write yourself in those stories. So that's definitely kind of the general theme that I loved in A Universe of Wishes. And then in each individual story, I also really loved it. I did not read the Victoria Schwab story. I'm not done with the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy, so I just feel like I need to read them chronologically, and then I'll go back and I'll read the story in A Universe of Wishes. Now into a January release, One of the Good Ones. That's the title. One of the Good Ones is the title. It is a contemporary, but it also has heavy mystery and also a little bit thriller vibes. So if you like Tiffany Jackson, specifically if you like Monday's Not Coming, if you like those vibes, then you definitely need to pick up One of the Good Ones, because it has that vibe, but it's also talking about sisterhood, and it's about what do we know and what don't we know about our sisters. It's about grief, right? What happens when we have unanswered questions about them, and when we realize we don't know them as much as we thought we did. But it is so multi-layered. It is one of the first books I read in November where I was kind of immediately almost like, yes, this is going to be 5-star reads for me. So that is definitely, it just defies description for me. It also, like, there's so many things I want to talk about at the end, which I can't because they're spoilers. So that's definitely something to keep on your list. And the next one, which is the last one I'm going to talk about, is I Love You So Mochi. This is the last 5-star YA book I read. I had to think about that for a second. And this also my favorite book of the month, so I left the best for last. But how can I describe why I love it? Okay, so there are so many elements of it that I love. So I love that Kimmy is really into fashion, and her dresses, like, I would like to wear all of her dresses. I love the romance storyline in it. It is precious. It is just so cute and precious and just super swoony. And yeah, just really makes you smile. What else do I love? I love the food descriptions, because this is set, a lot of it's set in Japan. I would say most of it is actually set in Japan. And so the food descriptions are just mouth-watering. Love them. I love the best friend relationship between Kimmy and her 2 best friends. So I love all of those different elements, but what I loved about it the most, I guess, or why it makes it into my top favorite book of the month, is because it talks about generational mother-daughter relationships. So it talks about her grandma and her mom and then her. So Kimmy's mom and Kimmy's grandma. And it talks about these family mistakes, family forgiveness, and also family expectation versus family guilt, right? So sometimes your family will think you'll do this, but then what happens when you don't want to do that? And how does that feel to you? And like, how does it kind of trickle down through your relationships, through your future relationships? And how does that shape you as a person? Your decision to either stay with their expectations or to break away. This generational look at all of these different relationships really kind of made it to top favorite book of the month, because so that is why once I finished it, I knew it was going to be my top favorite book of November. And also, if you liked Harley in the Sky, you will like I Love You So Mochi. They both go through a similar thing of trying to figure out their own ambitions and dreams and future versus their family and versus what their family thinks, and also the mother-daughter relationship between Harley and her mom and Kimmy and her mom, I think are not the same but are very similar. They have very similar core vibes to it. So that is my favorite book of the month, and it's also my last 5-star YA book. Next, I'm going to talk about my disappointing books. So I want to preface this by saying, you know, preference is everyone has different preferences, everyone has different likes, and different experiences reading it. For me, my biggest thing about these disappointing reads is probably it was overhyped to me. So let me just dive into it. The first is The Toll. This is the series finale to Scythe, Thunderhead, and The Toll. So this one is tricky for me because first off, I read a lot of reviews that were like, oh, the ending. Okay, I didn't hate the ending. I actually thought it was a satisfying ending. Some of it was kind of like, not sure about it, but in all, I thought it was a satisfying, fulfilling ending to me. Why, then, you may ask? Well, first off, it's kind of chunky, and I felt like there are some elements and some storylines that were introduced. I don't know where they went. I don't know where they went. I don't know where they went. I don't know why they were involved. It just was a little bit strange to me, and even after reading it, I was kind of like, wait, why did I know this? Like, what is the point of this? So I just feel like it could have been edited down a little bit. But what was the most disappointing is more my perspective. So I'll explain. I loved Scythe and Thunderhead because of the themes and because of the moral exploration. So looking at power and corruption and individual ability and individual agency. How do we fix a corrupt system? In a utopia, how do we fix a corrupt system? How do we enact change? What is our role in that system? So for me, those were like the core reasons I loved Scythe and Thunderhead, because they kept building on these themes that I had. And for me, The Toll was just all action. And that doesn't mean I didn't like it. Like, these aren't disappointing because I hated them. These are just disappointing because the thematic exploration and the character introspection that I loved in Scythe and Thunderhead just isn't as much in The Toll. Yeah, I wouldn't say, as I said, it's not that I didn't like this book, it's just the things that I loved so much about the series, I didn't find as much in The Toll, and so because of that, it was disappointing for me. But then obviously, if you go into it and you're like, oh, I'm ready for an action-packed series finale, then you'll obviously really like it. And so, the last one, super overhyped to me, super hyped. It is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. I know a lot of people who loved it. It's not that I didn't like it. Okay, let me go into this. I'm scared that for the first, YouTube video where everyone is more people will see it than on my past IG TV or IG lives. So I'm scared that people are gonna come to me and get real upset about it. But I will explain. So why didn't I why was I disappointed by Ninth House? It's not that I didn't like it. So let's start. Why didn't I like it? So the first off, there are 9 houses. I don't understand any of them. I just had so many world building questions, and I was buddy reading this with my friend who is not really in the book community. She's just an avid reader, and we were both like, what what are these houses? Like, what are they doing? I don't even remember their names. Their names were very confusing to me. And I understand this is the first in a series, but they talked about the other houses in the book, but I still don't understand what the other houses do. Secondly, it is a fantasy, right? So it's like kind of like a dark academia fantasy thing, but I guess I expected dark academia fantasy to be all like real hard fantasy. And not hard versus soft fantasy, not like that, but I mean just lots of fantastical elements. But in general, I think that this is more of like an urban fantasy. So it's a contemporary kind of academic setting with fantastical elements into it, or injected into it. So, but I guess the third reason, which is also a reason why A Deadly Education and I didn't sit well, which I mean, if you took out all the problematic elements and you just looked at all the bits that remained. So for me, I wanted to like Alex, Galaxy Alex, a lot more than I think I ended up doing it. And the main reason is because I didn't understand Alex's motivations. And what drove Alex as a character. I liked the things Alex was doing. I liked, the reasoning that I had about why she was doing it. But I guess for me, I needed a little bit more space for Alex's internal reflection to be like, these are the reasons why I'm doing it. And the thing is, I liked Alex's sense that justice, in the traditional sense, cannot be served, right? So in a system like this, there won't be justice to the true culprits because we live in a flawed system. So I liked that, but it was like, is this enough of a motivation? So that brings me to the end of the November wrap-up. I will leave all the links for books and my blog and all the social links down below for you to check out. And I'd love for you to comment and tell me your favorite book of November. And I will hopefully see you all for next month's wrap-up.